Good morning.
Good morning.
Today is Sunday, February 9th, 2025. Let's begin by setting our intentions and making aspirations using the Four Immeasurables prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. I'm going to read something from one of our favorite Instagram pages, Pema Lotus Instagram. This is from, we haven't talked much about this teacher, but he's really amazing. We were watching some of his teachings last night on YouTube, which you should do as well. His name is Garchen Rinpoche. And maybe we'll put him on the suggested teachers list, Nick. Zigar is spelled D-Z-I-G-A-R. Control, K-O-N-G-T-R-U-L, Rinpoche. Zigar Control Rinpoche. It takes courage to accept life fully, to say yes to our life, yes to our karma, yes to our mind, emotions, and whatever else unfolds. This is the beginning of courage. Courage is the fundamental openness to face even the hardest truths. It makes room for all the pain, joy, irony, and mystery that life provides. He speaks a lot about openness, open mind. I mean, and this is a very pithy, kind of simple quote, accepting life fully, saying yes to our life, yes to our karma, yes to our mind, emotions, and whatever else unfolds. This is the beginning of courage. But this is directly connected to our practice of meditation here. Many of you have come to this class or other meditation instruction classes for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's living in this world of hardship, uncertainty, anxiety, fear, political strife, environmental dangers and calamities and disasters, all these things that occupy a lot of our present mind. This class began during the pandemic, which was a time of a lot of uncertainty and anxiety, and people wanted some, way to deal with that, some relief from that, and that motivation, is legitimate. But from a Buddhist point of view, we're familiarizing ourselves with our mind, how our mind works, what's in our mind, right? So before you can say yes to all these things, yes to your karma, like you said, which is a really important, statement, because you don't really have a choice. You can say no to your karma, but that's just denial, right? Your karma is your karma. Karma meaning, the conditions of your life at the moment. What causes and conditions have arisen, and have created this circumstance of your life at the moment, and your actions in the present that are going to create causes and conditions in the future, right? In order to accept this life, this karma, these emotions, this mind, you have to look at it and start to really see what's going on there. In a lot of ways, the process, the process of meditating is really starting to be really, really brutally honest with yourself. It's only from being honest with yourself that you could start to see habitual patterns, karma, habitual patterns that are a result of karma that's been created in the past, right? Habitual patterns that basically lead to suffering, and lead to difficulties and conflicts and anxieties and fears and regrets and all these things. And they're habitual patterns that we've, without really addressing them, have taken root in a way that you kind of get used to, you justify. These can be patterns of reacting to other situations, other people, family members, people close to us, because that's often where we have a lot of the most difficult karma in relationships. And your habitual response and knee-jerk reactions to these situations may feel very righteous, justified, logical, necessary, yet it may be the very areas where you're hiding behind, and allowing limitations to dictate how you interact with the world, with life, with your with those around you, with the situations that you're engaged in. So the process of meditation is not just to calm down. It's not just to quell the anxieties and stress. It's really an uncovering, and for some of us, it might be the first time we're really looking at our mind and seeing what our mind is doing, and it can be very difficult and can be scary and can be overwhelming. And that's where the teachings come in, the Dharma, if you will, the teachings of the Buddha and all the masters and the commentaries and the sutras and shastras and all these things. So by uncovering what's going on in the mind, then what do we do? Now what? While we're looking at the mind, okay, I'm seeing this pattern of behavior. What do I replace it with? And Ziga Khantrul Rinpoche, there's a wonderful teaching on bodhicitta on YouTube. You can find it. I think it's called What is Bodhicitta? Something like that. I think it's really worth your while, and it's very much tied into what he's talking about here in this quote and what we're addressing. And there's another brief Pema Lotus Instagram page. Is a picture of a great master named Khenpo Munsel Rinpoche. It's probably not a ton of teachings by him. I don't think there's any videos on him because he was quite old and was in prison camps with our teacher Garchen Rinpoche, but by the time he was in prison in 1960. But he was one of our teachers, right? Difficult circumstances are an opportunity to deepen your practice. If you don't rely on your inner strength during hardships, when will you? It's something we should really keep in mind, when we're going through really difficult times and troubling times and uncertain times. It's like it's in a way, the practice is our refuge. Often when things are going good, we don't really need, we kind of take practice for granted. So we've said this many times, in this class, but if any of what we talk about here is of interest to you, we really encourage you to make a connection to an authentic teacher from an authentic lineage. There are many that are, have passed on, whose teachings are in books and some are on video. And there are many who are now teaching, they're alive, they're on this earth, they're teaching at this moment. You can attend teachings virtually, you can attend them in person, you could watch recorded YouTube videos, you can read their books. most of what I hear when I watch teachings or listen to teachings is not anything religious by any stretch of the imagination. It's mostly dealing with mind. It's more like psychology, if you will, a science of mind and how mind relates to the world. Our mind relate to, ourselves and the world. So, those of you that might feel a little bit uncomfortable about the religiosity of Buddhism, I would encourage you to, look past that and just think of it as working on your mind, even despite the iconography, which might seem foreign to you or exotic to you or religious to you, with the right instruction, you'll see how even the most kind of elaborate things you might see in a Buddhist temple or in a book, or things you might hear, or even mantras or prayer, that in essence, all these things are about your own mind. All these things you see and all these methods are really about working with your own mind, and uncovering the truth, the truth of, what the nature of our mind is and what our ultimate nature is. So on the Solidago Productions website, there's a list of teachers. On these Instagram pages like Pema Lotus and Jang Chub Norbu, that's another good Instagram page, JangChubNorbu. There's teachers and there's teachings, and you can go to teachings. You can this very ancient wisdom tradition is alive and in the world at this moment and available to you. So I can't really stress enough. I'm not here to convert people to Buddhism or anything, but obviously you're here out of an interest in working with your mind, and the teachings of the Buddha are certainly extremely effective. That's why they're still so present in the world and why they survive for so long. So we really encourage you to connect to the Dharma if this is of interest of you, to you. If it's enough just doing this class and meditating and having a practice, and that's fine. But like anything else of value, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. With that, Victoria's going to speak for a bit, and then we'll sit and practice for a bit, and then we'll open this up to questions. So there's a Q&A button on the Zoom toolbar, and you can ask questions on whatever you want. Well, if we have anything to say about them, we will.
Good morning, and first of all, we should all acknowledge that we're here, all of us, sitting on Sunday in the morning instead of going to brunch or doing something else, because we have an interest in learning something beyond just how our ordinary mind functions. Our intentions may come from very different places. Some of us want calm, some of us want anti-anxiety means, but some of us take it further and further and further and really start to have interest in Buddhism and become practitioners. It doesn't really matter. We should all acknowledge that we're here in the space and we are attempting to know more about our mind. We have the diligence, we have the patience to sit here together, to have this group, and to study Buddhism together. As practitioners, when we take it a step further and, we're not just simply, sitting here for curiosity, or we're not, just trying to, calm the three doors, the body, speech, and mind, to a place that's more acceptable and more whole for us. But if we take it further, because, the path is a gradual path. So as practitioners, we start to distinguish between the ordinary mind activity, which is what we call the deluded mind, and awareness. what is the immediate difference between awareness, and ordinary mind? Ordinary mind is concerned only with things out there. It's a constant regurgitation, the thought process of that is like that, even oneself is an object inside that structure. One is projected to the outside, how I think of myself in the office with all my coworkers, I am as a student in the world, I am as a person taking the subway, etc., etc. Awareness, on the other hand, is not concerned with things out there. It's not a mental process that is naively kind of always spilling over phenomena, over things, myself included as one of those things. Awareness is really more, instead of being turned outward, awareness is turned inward, and that's where the path of practice begins. Even for beginners, we start to turn awareness inward. Awareness is concerned with, yes, my feelings, my emotions, my, how I am experiencing the world, how I am responding to different appearances. And that's where the path really kind of starts. It initiates from this distinction, mind turned outward to mind turned inward. It doesn't mean that we become introverts, that we abandon the world. No, it's much more about what the mind does. How do we respond on an emotional, intellectual, spiritual level to appearances that arise? And as a practitioner, the first thing that we kind of also start with is understanding that beyond our mind and its projections, we don't really, there is no world for us, because world is experience. This kind of moot question, if the bear is there when I turn away, it's really irrelevant. It's not an important question. The important thing, because then you're still, there's still this kind of scientific pretense that when we turn away, there are measurements and things that can tell us about reality. But let's not kid ourselves. Reality is what we know, what we experience, the world as we experience it. And practitioner's mind is concerned with how we experience the world, our reactions to it. And there is kind of gradually, we go from this naive things out there, causing me to do this and this and this, to me, my reactions, and how do I really want to react to things, rather than things just happen to me. I have these spontaneous triggers that just, occur, etc., etc. Let me give you an example of the two ways of awareness and ignorance, how the mind, both are mind. The mind of ignorance, for example, let's take a thing like guilt. And also, let's remember too that, in unawareness, besides thinking that all things that I experience are real and true, they're out there, at the center of this narrative is the ego in which we believe. The ego is just like everything else. It's kind of a conglomerate created and cobbled together out of different ideas, and always reinforced by momentary, moment-to-moment consciousness. The sense of I is always refreshed. It's like what we do on the computer, refresh, refresh, refresh. Otherwise, we would lose the sense of that. So let's take an emotion like guilt. The things that go into it, how it's cobbled together, is very cyclical and circular reasoning of mind turned outward, at the center of which is an I. It's the kind of mental process that kind of never ends. It spins around the I, and always the sentence always starts with like, this was difficult, but, or I said bad things, but I was right. She did bad things and I screamed at her, but I was right. So there's always this kind of narrative of the things happening out there. And the ego as the responder to these realities outwardly. As a practitioner, we shed that First of all, we relax the ego, and second, we relax that we know appearances, that the world arises for us truly as it is, and that simply through my 5 doors of the senses and my mental consciousness, I know exactly what's happening. As a practitioner, mind turned inward, right away we start to become aware that, oh, when I got angry at that person, I was triggered, my ego was triggered, my ego was pushed, and my reaction, one of my reactions, let's say, was anger. And that is an afflictive emotion. And as a practitioner, I do not wish to be involved in this circular, cyclical kind of constant thing, such as when we feel guilt, because with guilt, we just perpetuate the story in its continuous circle. Now you take regret or remorse. That is where awareness begins to function. With regret or remorse, we first of all acknowledge what we do wrong. And most importantly, we say how to correct that wrong. And you take a certain mental turn, you acquiesce what we do wrong, and then we decide, from now on, my reaction is going to be such and such. I will correct this response, and I will respond with awareness. I will not be just simply I will not just give in to the circumstances and conditions of karma and be triggered and not have any kind of control. By control, I mean not just like we have these cobbled responses, but we want awareness rather than just be triggered and spill out there in this unconscious, subjective kind of, of form out there in the world. So let's say we have a very difficult person in our life, and that happens to be our parent or our child. We cannot turn away from a circumstance like that. So do we always keep being triggered and respond with guilt, which is this subjective, ignorant mind? Or do we want to kind of start a process of awareness where we decide how we respond, where we are not just repeating over and over and over things like, anger followed by guilt. We're angry because our ego gets punctured. And, it takes so little. And by the way, let me just add also to this whole, discourse that every moment of our waking and sleeping life, ignorant mind is working all the time, and ignorant mind is based on habitual propensities. Every time we get angry, anger is likely to come back as a response to any other kind of given situation where our ego gets tipped just a tiny little bit, Even when we're sitting and watching TV, subconsciously, all of these propensities, all of these habitual tendencies are happening all the time. The way I eat my peanuts, the way I look at the characters on the TV, etc., etc. Let's not think and be ignorant how these propensities are constantly reinforced. And so if we have any chance of becoming free of these negativities, of these propensities, if we have any chance of having like a slither of awareness, we have to really do a lot of work on that. We can become completely free, and that's what enlightenment is like purification of all negative propensities, afflictive emotions, and ignorance. That heap taken out, Buddhahood is a natural condition which dawns. We don't find Buddhahood somewhere outside. It happens as a result of purification and maturation of awareness. So how do we go from this ignorant mind, of this constant churning, this circular thing with the ego right at the center of it, into the thing of awareness? We learn the view, And what is the direct method against this churning of ignorance? Is first of all, we have to replace the ego for the mind that sees beyond just merely myself. The most direct and so to say, like a direction that we never lose sight of is to know that our mind is not directed at ourselves, but is directed to the benefit of others. Bodhicitta is a direct antidote to this mind of churning and constant creation and regurgitation of perpetual propensities and afflictions, an afflicted mind of ignorance. Awareness is something that right away wants to like divorce the ego and asks itself, how can I be aware? Well, we cannot have awareness when the ego is at the center of, of mind, of life, of our experience of the world. If we're churning everything through our ego mind rather than through our wisdom mind, compassion mind, bodhicitta mind, there is no chance for us to even, remotely think that we can be free of these kinds of things. Anger, jealousy, desire, those are all the kinds of things around which are wrapped around the ego and the me and mine. The only chance of moving away from that cluster of all these things and perpetual, running of that movie is to start to direct our mind away from the self and toward others. It's the only chance where we can, let's say, with that parent or the child who triggers us constantly, with whom it's very, very difficult. And remember, karmically, our parent or a child could be an enemy from a previous life. And that's completely okay. We have that in our life today because we need to fix it. We have to cure it. We have to change it. If we just keep going, oh my God, I have this terrible person in my life, most likely we will die with that and it'll repeat again and again and again. And also remember too, when we have that kind of a presence in our mind, that's a projection. An enemy is a projection. It's a part of our mind. It's a part of how we view reality from our source, from our awareness. Chances are that if we have one enemy, we have many, because that's just a part and parcel of our awareness in this present moment. But if we say to ourselves, no, I'm not going to look at reality, process reality in this way, we make a conscious decision. That's remorse. Remorse comes with resolve, right? Rather than guilt, this cyclical, all about me. But I'm justified in being angry. But he made me angry. But she said this, and I'm so angry again. If we want to get off that train and get onto another track, in other words, start the path of practice, we have to, how do we move away from it? We have to, first of all, not make the ego the center of the story. We make the welfare of that person who's very difficult in our life the center of the story. We say, I will not respond to that person through my ego, through my anger, through my jealousy, through my, negativity. I will look at that person with a loving heart. No matter how difficult, I resolve to look at that person with a loving heart. It is our only chance of any kind of freedom, of any kind of independence, of circumstances. And, by the way, karma, as Michael mentioned before, we have to accept that this is what we have. We have a difficult person in our life. This is what we have. But our responses of how we respond to that person moment by moment is something that we have a choice. We have a choice moment by moment by moment. We can be either unaware or aware. And if we are aware, we're not going to be responding in that same kind of cyclical, churning, afflicted mind, at the center of which is this me. She made me do it. He said this to me, and then I screamed, etc., etc. This is kind of like the child stage of everything. By the time we get to sit on the cushion, we're moving away. We are resolving not to process the world and to give in to circumstances, to the karmic things in the way through which we continuously churn and create more negativity, reinforce our negative patterns, and that become habits, and that really, that we identify with. We start as practitioners. When we say, hearing, pondering, and meditation. So how do we change things that are so solid, that are so habituated, that the minute I even think of that person, anger arises in me? How do I change it? First of all, we're in this class. The first stage of everything on the Buddhist path is hearing. Hearing means we have become aware that there are other ways of processing the world. There are other means by which we can respond and create experiences, right? An experience is a dance of something and my perception, my mind. It's always like things coming together. That's why we always talk about emptiness, because nothing's created, nothing is just self-standing there out in space all by itself. Everything is interconnected. So if I have this difficult person in my life, it has been created who knows by how many lifetimes, and this dance, this dependence is, why it has emptiness. It's not created, it's not self-standing. And I am a part of this dance, so I can choose my responses. I don't have to be triggered and repetitive every single time. As practitioners, this is like the step number one, where we say, I am not going to be triggered. I am going to respond in a way with my three doors that is more meaningful, more mindful, and more free. I am working toward liberating myself. What are we liberating ourselves from? Stupidity and afflictions, the 5 afflictions, Step number one, we start to hear. We go to teachings. We read. We hear. Buddhism has these methods. They can liberate us from the suffering of the 5 afflictions that we are, what is suffering? It's my anger. It's not what that person does. It's when I get angry is when the suffering arises inside me. Because we go by crazy people day and night who do terrible things, but we are not afflicted by them day and night. The suffering arises in the way that I process the information, in my triggers, in my responses, my experience. The way that it arises together with that information can arise in a variety of ways. I can be helpful to the situation and I can bring the temperature down, or I can be a part of the craziness and just like set it all on fire and pour more fuel. So we have choices that we have to make moment by moment by moment. First, we hear that Buddhism has these methods. We can become liberated. We can resolve the difficulties. We can be together. We hear that we can be together with very difficult people, with very difficult circumstances. We can deal with death. We can deal with illness. We can deal with loss. So we hear about it. We read about it. The teachers teach us about it. That's stage number one, but that's very gross level mind, knowing about this. Second level of mind, hearing, then comes pondering. Then we take that information we hear from the teachers, we read from the books, all these methods. What are these methods? Stage number two is we ponder. We think about it ourselves. We experiment. We become scientific. We go, well, if I change my response and et cetera, the next time I see this person, if I resolve to change my response, let me see how it all works. Let me also examine and kind of like dismantle this whole thing. This person makes me do. There's no one makes me do. We have to give that up. We're not 5 years old, most of us who are meeting here today. That's like a 5-year-old being saying to one's mother, I hit my brother because he made me do. Nobody makes us do. Those are all choices. We let the responses out of ourselves. They're not out there. The harsh words, the horrible speech and acts, they're not out there until we let them out. They come from us. Of course, the source of letting out, whether it's ignorance and ego or wisdom, makes all the difference in the world. So that's stage number 2. We ponder from the gross mind of just hearing. We ponder, we analyze, we really take stock. We say, I'm going to behave like this and like this and like this. But to really, truly dismantle a negative habitual pattern, you need meditation. And that's why meditation is so key. Only in meditation can we truly have that space with ourselves, with our mind, where we say, I'm going to make choices. This open mind conversation that Michael mentioned before, Garchen Rinpoche, is not when the world comes at us, that we're not hearing it from this little not, me and mine, but we're hearing it from the big mind, from this space. We let the difficult person in, we let the difficult person say what they say, but we're not jumping at them with our afflictions, how we usually would do. Like, this is the negative person and this is me, negative person, and this is what we do. This is where the suffering is created. Rather, the open mind is the third stage of growth, meditation. In meditation, awareness becomes much more spacious, and I don't mean just like a sitting act of sitting on the floor on the cushion, but that is in the beginning where we do cultivate that openness, that spaciousness, by bringing down the thoughts and creating like a mind of equanimity. When thoughts arise, we look at negative thoughts and pleasant thoughts in the same way. We do that in meditation. We cultivate that big, that largeness, that openness in meditation. And so the next time that difficult person comes, we watch from the big space of the mind. We remember. That's what mindfulness is. We remember the promise we made, the resolve. We said, I will not react in the same way. I will not do this all the time and cause suffering to myself and cause suffering to the other person who's actually in my care. Could be my child, could be my aging parent. I will not get triggered. I will not lose it. And if I lose it, I'll just come back and get myself back on track. We go into a difficult situation with the resolve that I will maintain my awareness. I will be kind. I will think of the benefit of that person rather than just like he's screaming, I'm screaming. I will listen and I will respond in a mindful way. It doesn't mean that you become like a doormat, not at all. Rather, when we are not triggered and we can respond from the openness of our mind, out of awareness, out of wisdom, we can dismantle the situation for that person and for ourselves. So this is the benefit of the hearing, pondering, and meditation. And we really do need all 3 levels of it. The practice has to become deeper and deeper and deeper. And actually, it's good, like Michael quoted, Khenpo Mulso Rinpoche, to have difficulties in life, because where will we practice? I mean, we can't hope to consider ourselves practitioners until a difficult situation arises and the practice kicks in. We don't need practice when we're chewing potato chips on the sofa or laying around on the beach. Practice happens when we are met with adverse and difficult circumstances. Those circumstances could be exterior, or they could also be like these things that arise in our mind that are painful, and we're dealing with those in the way of wisdom and awareness. So, just to, again, basically, kind of open up a little bit more of the discussion that Zigor Control, quote, Michael quoted today. And just for ourselves, we have to live with, awareness is knowing that we always have a choice. We actually are faced with the choice moment to moment to moment to moment. And we can choose, but we need the teaching and we need the practice. We have to take it from the hearing, from like the gross, yes, I agree with these statements. Then we have to take it to the next level. We have to ponder it. We have to make it our own experience. We have to play with difficult things to see how we can best reshape them, and play and work with them, work on our emotions, making sure we're not always triggered by the circumstances, by this karmic density that always surrounds us, because within the karmic, karma is not predestination. Karma are the circumstances that are here in this moment, but how we respond, that is up to us. There is liberation to be gotten in every single moment. And of course, little by little by little, we dismantle those thick habitual patterns. Happens little by little, doesn't just all at once. And look to our teachers. Why do we look to our teachers? They cannot liberate us, but we can see enlightened beings who remain in continuous state of awareness without breaking it. We can see how the mind of that luminous mind of stable awareness functions in the world. They live in the same world like us, but they certainly don't live and process the world like we do, ordinary beings in the ignorant mind. I could never imagine my teacher, Garchen Rinpoche, said, but he made me mad, so I slapped him or I screamed at him. That's not possible. Why is it not possible? Because he no longer lives in that ordinary deluded mind. And so we look to our teachers. They're the shining examples of what it means, awareness in its continuous unbreakable form. That's why they call it Vajra. Vajra means unbreakable, adamantine. When awareness becomes so stable, so it shines brilliant, like it's like the rays of the sun. The sun doesn't care, it shines on good boys and bad boys. The sun shines on all creatures exactly the same, and has a quantumous love and brings a quantumous warmth and life. And that's what we want to cultivate in ourselves. With that will come the liberation from afflictive mind and from ignorance.
Thank you very much. So let's practice meditation. The first class of this year, Nick, was that the 5th or the 12th of January? If you go to the YouTube channel, Meditation with Michael Imperioli YouTube, and go to the first class of 2025, there's a very detailed review of the techniques that we practice in this class, but we don't go over them every week because most of you are return customers, so we don't have to belabor it all the time, although it's always, we talk about these techniques so often, but it's good to keep repeating. It's good to be very clear on the nuts and bolts of this. So we sit on the floor. I use a cushion, many people do, to get the hips either in line or above the knees. You can sit cross-legged if you're flexible and you want to do a half a lotus, like 1 foot up. Some people are very flexible and do a full lotus. Not necessary. This isn't even necessary. If you want to just be cross-legged, that's fine. It's to your comfort level. You don't want to be, straining, and be really uncomfortable during the session. You can sit in a chair if you can't really handle sitting on the floor, if you have some physical, limitations or something. If you're in a chair, as well as sitting on the floor, it's important that the back is straight. So you're not leaning back in a chair. Back is straight. And your feet, the same principle, the hips should be either in line or above the knees, feet flat on the floor. So back is straight, not rigid, not tense, just straight and erect enough, to have that alertness, if you will. Hands, often I do this in the lap. So the left hand is up, palm up, and the right hand rests in the left. Resting in the lap and the thumbs touch. You don't have to do that though. You can do this. Both hands on the knees if you want to. Or even like this. Sometimes people touch the thumb to the ring finger. This one I like. head is slightly tilted. So your head is not up, it's not straight, it's slightly tilted on an angle. To take the strain off the curve in your neck, right? You want that relaxed. Shoulders are not back, they're just kind of upright but relaxed. The lips are touching lightly, the teeth are apart, and the tongue is resting where the upper teeth meet the roof of your mouth. And you're breathing through your nose. If you can't breathe through your nose because you're congested or something, then you can breathe through your mouth. But this is the suggested way, right? So the lips are just touching slightly and teeth are apart. And the gaze of your eyes, we meditate in this class with our eyes open. The gaze is kind of following the angle of the bridge of your nose, which is slightly tilted downward. So the gaze is kind of following that. And the gaze of your eyes rests gently on whatever is in front. Not intensely focused, not spaced out or, out of focus, cross-eyed or something like that. Just resting on whatever's there. And we're breathing through the nose. And just focus your attention on the place where the air moves in and out. The nostrils meet the upper lip. Just let's do 3 breaths. They're not really deep breaths, they're not shallow breaths, just natural breaths. But just focus your attention, your awareness, your mind on that breath moving in and out for 3 breaths. Now just relax the body in this posture and do 3 more breaths. Before you take that first breath, just think of the tension in your body just kind of melting away. Now do the breaths again. Focusing your attention on where the breath moves in and out. This is the posture and the breath. That's the foundation of what we're doing. Now, where does the mind come in? Besides focusing, your attention on the breath, your mind is where the thoughts are going to arise, and you will have thoughts. And they could be very varied and very random and, a wide array of past, present, and future and things. So the key here, the misconception is that meditation is not thinking, which is not the case. That if thoughts arise, somehow you're doing it wrong, which is not the case. And the fact that you have a lot of thoughts means your mind is exceptionally busier than other people and you can't meditate, which is not the case. The mind thinks, that's what it does. It has cognition, it has that potentiality, and it will. So what we do with the thoughts is what is important to meditation. What we do with the thoughts in this technique that we're using is we recognize the fact that we're thinking first. This is big. Big time. Because we've gone through our lives not aware that we're thinking. We just accept this inner monologue, constant train of thought as, who we are, basically. So the first key is recognizing that you're thinking. And the first technique we use to working with these thoughts is when you recognize you're thinking, you say to yourself, back to the breath, and you focus your attention again on the breath. Very simple. And you'll probably have to apply this a lot, and there may be a chunk of time that goes by where you're not aware that you're thinking and you are, and that's okay. The second technique that we use is, I'm trying to find the timer here. We imagine the mind this mind that we're creating awareness, having awareness of during this meditative practice, right? We imagine the mind as this limitless, clear blue sky. And the thought, when we recognize it, is a cloud that we suddenly see in the sky. Upon recognizing the cloud, the cloud that has arisen in the sky, the thought that has arisen in the mind, we watch it dissolve back into the sky, the thought back into the mind, leaving no trace. These are the very simple techniques that we use here. I'll briefly go into it during the, as like a guiding thing during the practice, but not too much. Again, the key is using your mind, your awareness, to recognize that a thought has arisen, and then back to the breath, or watch the thought dissolve. And you could start by settling into the posture, letting the body tension go, and focusing your attention on the breath, the movement of the breath. If you're using the sky metaphor, sky technique, settle your body, settle your mind into that great expanse of limitless, luminous, calm clarity, which is the nature of our mind. I'm aware that I'm thinking about what I have to do when this class is over, so I put my attention back on where the breath is moving, or I watch that thought dissolve like a cloud into the sky-like nature, mind into that limitless blue clarity, and settle back into that calm. If you need to shift your posture in your seat, that's okay. Just settle back into the pose, back into the practice. Back to the breath. If you feel you need, take a deep breath just to kind of catch up with the oxygen. Just you can do it. Return more to that natural breath after you feel that comfortable again. Okay, fantastic. We're going to take some questions. We have about 10 minutes for questions, so we might not get to all of them. We'll give you the email. What advice would you give to a 19-year-old? Start meditating and find a teacher. Find an authentic teacher from an authentic lineage. I mean, I wish I would have found one at 19. I don't mean that facetiously or anything. I really, you're here, because of obviously a desire to work with the mind for whatever reason, and the most effective way to work with the mind really is that I've found at least is through these practices and teachings. Meditation is a bit of respite right now for me. Feels like escapism almost without over-analyzing. Is that an appropriate way of engaging with meditation? Yes and no. Yes and no, in that what escaping may be from this constant chain of thought, but at the same time that you are engaging with the mind. Uh, you're not escaping from the mind as much as you're observing the mind. We're not spacing out into kind of some nether realm. It's actually you're not tuning out. You're really tuning in and becoming very, very, very sensitive and aware of what the mind is doing. The more kind of sensitivity you have towards how the thoughts are arising and what kind of thoughts and what kind of flavor and what kind of energy, the more effective the practice is going to be. I mean, the respite in a way, it kind of comes naturally if you settle into this pose as we do, and you relax the body and you're focusing on the breath. There's a calming quality to it, but at the same time, there's a sharpness to the awareness that we're kind of cultivating, if that makes sense. Victor, do you want to comment on that?
No, I think what you said is perfect. I mean, of course, it feels we are relaxing body, speech, and mind. We're relaxing the body and letting the tension go. The speech is just our breath, so it's our energy. So we're relaxing that, and we're relaxing the mind by making what arises equanimous, by letting go the big and important, by settling stuff down. It's very, very relaxing, but only through when the dust settles, can we actually see the composition, the nature of mind. So there's no reason to be guilty for being relaxed. Don't confuse and don't focus on that aspect of it, and don't judge. You have to drop any kind of judgment. Remember, you are going into meditation so that you can experience the nature of your mind. There is nothing more important in this life, because when the time comes for us and everything is disintegrating and we're leaving this life, if we don't know the nature of our mind, we've never experienced it. I mean, none of these experiences we're going through right now in this life are going to be as meaningful as the experience of the nature of mind. So just relaxing the judgment, because that's just another projection, that's just another layer of thought of the ego, and settling the mind until you go through the loud, clear layer, like when the plane goes through the clouds and finally bang and goes to the blue. It's like that. It takes work and takes practice for the mind to go to the blue of the nature of the mind. So doing it without guilt and judgment.
What do you think is the most challenging aspect incorporating Buddhist principles into modern life? I think arrogance is one, and I don't mean just individual arrogance, but cultural. As a culture, and in our modern world, we often think that we have everything figured out. When I was talking about before about Buddhism being much more like a science of mind, because as a religion, often it's looked on by scientific minds and more rational minds as kind of this archaic superstition, relying on external interventionist forces and things, which it really is not. Like I said before, when you start to delve into the practice, you'll see even the most elaborate of the iconography or images that you see ultimately is all about your own mind. Buddha was not a god. Buddha is not worshipped as a god. We're not practicing Buddhism because Buddha said to do this. Buddha found a certain realization and discovered certain truths and basically said, this is what I found and this is how I found it. So I think one of the most challenging aspects is understanding the value of it as a modern approach to living. Being able to accept, and having some humility, and thinking that there's people that know more than us. Do you want to continue that?
What Michael said, and that's very symptomatic of that our time, and I'm speaking specifically about our society in the West, is permeated with selfishness. We are encouraged to feel and to react in moronic ways with anger and greed. We call this, the mind of achievement. We want to take away from someone else and get their bigger house or the bigger car. In the meantime, all of these thoughts, we are actually grazing like cows on this whole, plane of media selling us things day and night. This whole thing of being individuals and being so attached to our responses and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is nothing but just a very big kind of mental absence. How do I know I need that bigger house? How do I know I need that bigger car? Well, I do know that I am bombarded with suggestions for these desires. I can no longer distinguish whether they're my thoughts or they're actually generated by, interest in companies and things that are constantly bombarding myself and other members of my society. The only possibility of knowing what one is and what one even remotely wants is sitting down to meditation and discontinuing this whole moronic narrative about me and how important I am. I mean, from morning till night, we encourage our children in this society, it's all about you, you're the most important person. Actually, it's very, very detrimental. I think that is one of the biggest, most difficult challenges of our society today, because while we're encouraging this seeming individuality and, identity and, the strong presence and feeling this and this, I feel like the reduction of knowing who we are has become so ubiquitous and extreme. We couldn't fathom not even a little bit for a moment what we are and what we want, given the circumstances in which we live. Our only option is the vehicle of practice, because our ordinary lives are so oversaturated by this network, of advertising and creating different desires and, being fooled into that we produce these thoughts and desires ourselves, that the only possibility is to sit down, meditate, to quench, to quell, to actually silence all this crap and turn it off for a moment, to even know even just a tiny little taste of who we are and what we are. I think that's one of the biggest perils and difficulties of our society, because everything that we think, this cobbled together thing I am, it's just it's an artificial farce. It's a conglomerate of all the things we're flushed with day and night. And I think I think there's such a mental disintegration on the most basic, profound level that, if we, at least momentarily, every so often, do not wake up from this crazy dream of, addictive behaviors and, completely artificially stimulated likes and dislikes, wants and I must have, and I must achieve, and I must do, and all this kind of waste of time crap. I think that's the biggest difficulty, is just even having a glimpse of what we truly are. If we erase all those waves of advertisements and insanity that has really produced this product, which we consider this identity. I think we are so far removed from knowing anything about ourselves that, the way back is difficult and arduous. I mean, our culture basically stumped out kind of like even traces of awareness. We are so discouraged to have awareness at all. I think for us, it's a gigantic challenge, and we have to work much, much harder than those people that we look down upon. People, the nomads and the poor. The people in third world countries. But actually, those people are the ones that have still some kind of inkling of nature, of family, of self. They have much deeper things that have remained of humanity, whereas we are just these artificial constructs from morning to night, stuffed like empty sacks with these completely by someone else made ideas of what we should be, what is successful, what we should be working to attain. And then we spend our entire existence, our days spent in struggling against and for these artificialities, which don't nurture us. They nurture someone else, but they certainly don't nurture us. I think that's, to me, in my mind, that's the biggest issue.
We'll take one more question and then we'll wrap it up. But remember, if you want to ask questions, go to Michael Imperioli Meditation 101 at Gmail. And someone's asking about a book for a beginner. We've been recommending The Power of Mind by Khentrul Lodro Taye Rinpoche.
And also anything from Pema Chödrön. Pema, P-E-M-A, Chödrön, C-H-O-D-R-O-N. She's really wonderful for beginners.
Yeah. This is a good question. On estrangement from a parent, I heard we cannot turn away. Is that the recommendation even when a parent is abusive and the interactions are consistently hurtful? When there is mental illness present, the parent has a lifelong pattern of self-soothing by harming the child. Is the child karmically obligated to continue to interact with that parent? No. By interact mean if you need to remove yourself from, this daily or whatever regular pattern of abuse, of course. You're not, Victoria mentioned before, we're not becoming aware of, dynamics of afflictive emotion, negative emotion from our own side or from another side to just allow it to continue. Think of it like this. If that parent is, abusive, creating negative karma, to allow that continue, you're not doing them any favors either, right? Let alone, just allowing yourself to be abused. So changing, the circumstance of the dynamic, the removing yourself from that, of course, that's reasonable behavior. At some point, though, in order to free yourself from this dynamic, because just removing yourself from the day-to-day and the physical proximity of it, or even, maybe communication of it, the psychological connection often is not severed. And if you hold resentment and anger and hatred towards this parent, even though you've removed yourself from the cycle of abuse and even maybe prevented them from abusing because because of a distance, if you remain with that anger and hatred and resentment, you're still suffering the same abuse in a way. And often, depending on the level of abuse, you may need therapeutic help, psychologists, psychiatrists, some kind of talk therapy. That's often very helpful in dynamics like this, having perspective on it. But also, the Dharma, practice of meditation can, also give you some kind of understanding and angle to look at it and look at them, you know, to have compassion for them. Again, not by remaining in the situation and letting you be abused and letting them be abusers, but just understanding, how we have this thing of like the abuser being somehow the winner or something, or somehow being the more advantageous position, but they're suffering as much as you are. Believe me, that no one coming from that abusive mind is a happy person, right? So the teachings, give us a perspective that can be very healing, for yourself primarily, but also from both sides.
It's the most important thing is to deal with the negative afflictive emotions that are triggered, that arise. And we always have to start by saying, these emotions are my habitual responses. This is something that I am projecting from myself. So we start by healing ourselves, Sometimes I find a practice without so much, analysis and everything. Sometimes a practice of Tonglen could be incredibly transformative. And in Vajrayana Buddhism, which is what we practice, we put the difficult people, the enemies, we meditate on them in front of us. So I find whether in person or in sitting, in a sitting meditation or just bringing the person to mind, doing Tonglen. Tonglen is when on the breath you inhale their difficult, negative, sick, afflicted, mental states, which is what makes them like that. It's like a person who is, poisoned, infected, their mind is in such a kind of a place. But anyone's mind can be this one moment and that another moment. That's the beauty of impermanence. We can go from horrendous to to a Buddha. So never losing that perspective, and for oneself exactly the same. So sometimes maybe not overanalyzing, but the important thing is to address your response, your reaction to that person, to your parent, and dismantle that, to go from negative to a choice, to an aware response of awareness, where little by little that awareness becomes wisdom and becomes steady. You make a decision on how you want to respond to them. And you also have to remember that they, despite whatever their current mental state is they have Buddha nature. They may be afflicted, but the stains, the afflictions are temporary, just as they are with us, they are with all sentient beings. And so I think sometimes, when the difficulty is so severe, to pass through that cloud layer, you start with you say, I can do compassionate work. I am not gonna just judge them and call them bad and, use that mind of ignorance, and protect the ego inside that mind of ignorance. But you say, I'm gonna be a practitioner and I'm gonna do compassionate work for them. And I'm not going to care how they respond, because compassion should be always without waiting for any kind of result. Compassion comes from us. It is an act of freedom. It is an act of us using our wisdom and creating activity based on that. It has nothing to do with responses, has nothing to do with the payback, has nothing to do with anything. That's what freedom really is. Not waiting for anything from anyone else. It's us doing the work. And so, Tonglen, you visualize your parent, and you do Tonglen. You inhale, you visualize. You inhale the dark energy, and on the and you break up at your heart center. You have like a brilliant, almost, a tiny sphere that is like the sun. And as the darkness on the inhale hits the heart sphere, the sun breaks up all the darkness, and on the exhale you send back white clear light right into their heart center. And so you do that work, and you change yourself, you transform, that not every time that you think of them and like a negative afflictive response comes up, you're afraid of them, or you want them dead, or whatever it is, you start to change it actively on your own, until you can get to a point of forgiveness, because without it, I cannot see any possibility of release, of being able to drop that afflictive mental state that you're experiencing in conjunction with your parent. It's very, very important to work on our feelings. They have to work on themselves, but very often when we transform ourselves, we transform the dance, because all that negativity happens also in conjunction between us and them. It's the dance between the two that creates this kind of either a fire or something, something ugly or a thing of beauty. But we have to start, we always work with ourselves, we always work on our negativity and transforming that until we liberate it. We work, first we're doing the alchemical thing, we're working on transformation until there comes a moment when we no longer even need to do it, where our awareness of that person has become so stable and so clean that it no longer, when we think of them, the poisons do not arise inside us. That suffering you're describing, all that toxicity, it arises inside us whenever we think of that person. So we've projected so much onto that person. That doesn't mean that objectively that person doesn't have a lot of work to do on themselves. At the same time, we have to change. We have to liberate the negativities. We can't leave it up to someone else to change us. Even our teachers, they can show us examples, they can give us teachings, but we have to do the work. We have to choose to want to be whole and free and liberated and aware, and we have to do work for that. That's not gonna just come because we removed ourselves and put away a couple of miles or a couple of cities or a continent between us, because every time you're gonna think of that person, guilt will arise, fear of worthlessness or whatever else, and from those things of fear and worthlessness and rejection, anger will arise, and from anger other things will arise. It's like a continuous imprisonment of these negative kleshas arising, and the more often they arise, patterns are formed, then chances are that they pollute the rest of your life as well, because you'll be looking at life with all that makeup on the inside. And even though they're far away and they don't trigger you, believe me, those things did not leave unless you really clean them up on your own. It's very important to do the work of cleaning the messes that we have inside if we have any chance of being liberated and really like made whole and healing. So start with Tonglen. Work on, relaxing the ego, relaxing the judgment, create spaciousness, and be able to look at your parent, afflicted, sick, however they are. Think of them as a person with mental illness, and practice compassion. Practice compassion, because that's there is really no option. There's ignorance, and then there's awareness. And we need to practice compassion to be not living and suffering and suffocating in ignorance and the afflicted states of mind.
Well, let's close by dedicating the mirrors from today's class to the benefit of all beings by saying dedication prayer. By this merit may all beings
beings
attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. We'll see you. Thank you, Nick Solidago, our producer. We'll see you next week.